welcome to the Lo-Fi workshop. I have to make myself a slide to introduce myself because I'm not used to talking about myself, and so I have to remind myself, like, why should you care? We're going to talk about crowdfunding today, which is something that I have done successfully one time, and I'll tell you later why I hope I never have to do it again, because it was a lot of work. I started in radio when I was in high school, and then I was like, oh, TV is really cool as well, so I went to film school. And then after film school, I actually graduated in 2009, right after the market crashed, and they said that there was like 1,000 applicants for every open job in LA. So it was a garbage time to graduate. I had no intentions of freelancing. However, literally I couldn't get a job. One of my professors was like, hey, we know this TV channel in Garden Grove, and they want someone to set up a YouTube channel for them. And I know you're like techie, so can you do that? And I was like, yeah. And so they paid me to set up their YouTube channel. And then they're like, oh, you do video stuff too? And so then they started paying me to help on their productions. And that's how I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to freelance until I find a job. And then I just kept freelancing. I've also worked with sports broadcasters for like 14 years. So I got a lot of inside like sports directed information. When I started in radio, it was sports radio. So that's kind of where a lot of my experience is. But through that, I did a lot of marketing and audience building, which, as it so happens, is very important for crowdfunding. So we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. In 2013, I got it into my head that I was going to make a feature documentary on this art from the island. I'm from the Cook Islands. My dad's from the Cook Islands, and there's this art form there called Tivai, and it's, you know, like a lot of traditional art forms, kind of dying, and I was like, oh, I'm going to save it. I'm going to make a documentary about it. The ambitions of my younger self. Things didn't go quite as planned, but in 2015, I launched a crowdfunding campaign on Seed and Spark. I raised $5,203, which just exceeded my goal. It was a lot of work. I learned a lot through that process. The film is not finished. It's my life's work. What can I say? It's just going to be something that keeps on going, in part because I'm here, and all of the artists and makers are like a 9-hour plane ride away, which makes things difficult, you know? And also I had to do a lot of learning. Now I teach the radio classes here at Saddleback. I'm in grad school, and I'm an artist. So I still make stuff with film, and I still make stuff with audio, but they're like, I don't know, they're not traditional films necessarily. They're more like art films and like really short pieces at the moment. We'll see what happens in the future. So that's me, and that's why when Rima said, oh, what do you want to come and talk to Lo-Fi about? I said, okay, I could talk about crowdfunding, or I can talk about how to fail at making a documentary. And Rima chose crowdfunding. So I'm curious, is anyone here planning to do a crowdfunding campaign in like the next 3 months, 3 to 6 months? Okay, 1 person, 2 people. Oh, 3. Okay, all right. Out of curiosity, how much money do you think you want to raise with crowdfunding? Like, what's your budget that you're hoping to get people to contribute to?
3,000 to 4,000.
Okay, that's very manageable, especially for your first campaign. Any other like target numbers?
5 to 10.
5 to 10? Still reasonable.
The same,
5 to 10. I think those somewhere between 3 and 4, very manageable for a first crowdfunding campaign. 5 to 10, perhaps a little bit ambitious. It depends on your network, which we'll talk about, but still doable if you learn from the right people. The thing about crowdfunding is it is a lot of work to run a successful campaign. All of the work that you put into your film, if you want to actually raise like $5,000, $10,000, you're going to have to put the same amount of work into the crowdfunding campaign in order for it to be successful. There's this misconception that you just post your crowdfunding campaign on social media, and then other people will post it, and then people will donate, and that's how you're going to make your money. That could not be more wrong. I'll give you the stats in a little bit. But before that, I wanted to talk through some foundations. Feel free to ask questions as we go, or even at the end. I have no idea how long this is going to be. So we'll just roll with it. a few foundations, like things to think about. And this is not comprehensive, by the way, of like everything you need to know about crowdfunding, because it actually takes a few hours to go through stuff like that. This is more like introduction, stuff that I learned that I think is really important. So this is before you launch a campaign, before you even necessarily start planning out a campaign. It's really important to build a team. You absolutely should not run a crowdfunding campaign by yourself. I did it. I didn't intend to do it. I had a co-producer at the time. Things didn't work out. And that happened kind of like right as we were getting into the crowdfunding campaign. So I ended up doing all of the work myself. And it's like having another job. It's that much work. So I definitely recommend that if you can get other people from your crew to help, not everyone has to help, but have people who are going to help you with the campaign, help you do direct outreach, help you make social media posts, help you do the plan and make sure that all the posts get out on time. That's a great thing. I also know a lot of people will try to crowdfund like right before they start shooting. I did that as well. I ran my crowdfunding campaign. It started May 26th. I ran it for 30 days, so right into June. And then I had, I think, 2 weeks, and then I was getting on a plane to go shoot. Looking back, that was a mistake. I wish I had had a bigger break. So just something for you to think about. If you're wanting to do a successful campaign kind of like simultaneously while you're shooting or doing pre-pro, that might be a lot depending on the size of your crew. Also, the other reason you want a team is the more people who are working on your campaign or the more people who are on your crew, the more money you can raise. So I actually think for me as one person, $5,000 was probably about the limit that I could have raised on my own. I might have been able to hit 6, but I really don't think that I could have gotten more than that. So I'm lucky that I had set the bar where it was. So more people on your team means more potential for money. Fiscal sponsorship is a really good thing for you to think about, especially because you're early in your career. If you have a film that has some kind of angle that would be interesting to a nonprofit. Does anyone know what fiscal sponsorship is? Probably not. Okay. Fiscal sponsorship is when you go to a nonprofit who has tax-deductible status and you say, hey, I'm making this thing. I would love to partner with you. And they'll say, okay, we'll accept donations on your behalf. And because they're going to a nonprofit, whoever contributes to your campaign can now write that off their taxes. So they get a tax deduction and you get money. And what I had found in this case is that people are likely to contribute a greater amount to your campaign if they can also get a tax write-off. I had people tell me straight up, oh, it's a tax write-off? Well, then I'll give you like $300 more. I was like, awesome. So this works best if you have, again, like some kind of angle. So there are fiscal sponsors who that's all they do is they sponsor films. So you can definitely Google that. There it is. So you can just Google film fiscal sponsor and you'll get different companies. And this is the primary thing that they do. However, it does not have to be a film fiscal sponsor. You could get any nonprofit can do this. So if there's a nonprofit that has a goal or a mission that kind of aligns with your storyline, even if it's a fictional storyline, you could potentially partner with them. And it will be up to you to approach and pitch them why you think it would be a good partner. I recommend choosing a fiscal sponsor that would be a good partner for your film rather than choosing one out of desperation, which is what I did. I couldn't find one that really, like a film fiscal sponsor that really aligned with what I was trying to do, which was make a cultural documentary. At the time, that wasn't really something that people wanted to fund. They wanted to fund more politically minded films when it came to docs. So I picked the film fiscal sponsor that I thought was most likely to say yes to me, and they did. They said yes, but there wasn't a ton of support. So some fiscal sponsors will give you mentoring or expertise because they're nonprofits. They fundraise all the time. So they know a lot that you don't know. Some of the film ones, they may have additional resources that you can tap. They might give you access to their audience, like their email list or something like that. So choose one that's going to be a good partner for your film if this is a route that you're going to go. I don't have it in my slides, but some of them may want a percentage of what you raise. So just keep that in mind. I forgot to put that in there. Yeah.
I have a question. You don't have to know, but if you happen to know it, I'm just going to ask.
Yeah.
How does one become a fiscal sponsor or a film fiscal sponsor?
So anyone can do it if you're a nonprofit, especially if the thing like aligns with the mission of your nonprofit. So when you're filling out nonprofit paperwork, you file with the state government and the IRS, and you have to prove that you're like doing something good for the community, so that people who donate to you, it'll count as a donation on their taxes, and you have to then submit, give them a receipt basically of what you donated, and they'll give that to their accountant at the end of the year, and if they donated $500 to your fiscally sponsored film, they get to take $500 off of their gross income for their taxes, which is a nice thing for them. And like I said, I know for a fact that I had multiple contributors who contributed high dollar amounts specifically because it was tax deductible. So it's a good thing to think about. Relationship building is probably the most important thing that you can do for crowdfunding and also for your career, let's be honest. You've probably, those of you who have already worked a little bit in the industry, you know it's about relationships. You get jobs through people, and it's not, a lot of people call it networking. I just don't really like networking because that's like, what can you do for me? Whereas relationship building is what can I do for you? And then we're setting up this kind of reciprocal relationship where I'm going to help you, you're going to help me, and it can continue on throughout your career. Well, this is the same for the people that you're going to help fund your movie. Because if they help you fund one movie, they're probably more likely to help you fund another one, or to help you continue funding this one if you fund in stages. So you want to start gathering your audience or your followers before you even start your film. Like in pre-production is a great time when you're just beginning to be like, okay, I have this idea. This is what the idea is. We're going to make it. Here's kind of a rough timeline. Here's where I'm going to do my crowdfunding. Start an Instagram account or a Facebook account or a Twitter account or a TikTok or whatever. An email list is really ideal, by the way. Email has a ton of power, and I think that we don't talk about it enough as indie filmmakers because it's just easier to do social media, right? Email can be a little bit more work. So I always recommend an email list if you can. There's plenty of free software to do that, but you can also just do the thing where you go out and you start asking your parents and your friends and your family, hey, can I email you about updates about my movie? And they'll probably say, yeah, sure. And then you build a spreadsheet. Like, that works. But also, like, I like ConvertKit a lot. They have a free tier, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they have a free tier. So that's an option for you as well. Social media accounts, attending in-person events. You cannot knock face-to-face interaction. I did a lot of this. I had a flyer, which I have linked. I have a link at the end for you, that I took out to events when I was meeting people, conferences. Again, even if you're doing a fictional short, if the topic of the movie, like I know Rima did one that was like trafficking, right? There are events and conferences and experts and nonprofits around human trafficking that you can go and talk to. And not only would they be a good resource for you, like to help you with shoring up your script or something like that, but they'll be good resources for you for funding, because that may be where you find a fiscal sponsor who says, yeah, this is a valuable story, and it will help us, spread the message about human trafficking. So in-person events are great. Do not ask for money the first time you meet someone. Don't ask for anything the first time you meet someone. Lots of people do this, and this is actually really common too in film. Like when you go to a networking event, you're like schmoozing. People are going to ask you stuff, right? Oh, you work there? Hey, do you think you could? That's not relationship building. That's schmoozing, and it may work, but it's not a great long-term strategy. So again, when you're first talking to someone, your goal is to find out more about them and what their likes are, what they're passionate about, and trying to figure out where it might intersect with the work that you're doing. You want to think about how your audience or followers are going to benefit from following your film. Again, as filmmakers, we tend to think about like, well, I'm making a thing for the world, and this is my gift to the world to consume. It may be very true, but also your audience needs something from you more than just the gift of your film or whatever it is that you're making in crowdfunding. So what are you going to do for them aside from making the film? What are they going to get out of it? Are they going to get the behind-the-scenes experience? Are they going to feel like they contributed to the success of a young person's future? Are they going to feel like they contributed to the success of a movie that matters, that tells a meaningful story? Maybe it's a story from their culture or something similar to their culture. I found that for me. I was doing in-person stuff while I was doing the crowdfunding campaign. And because I was making a cultural doc, I had people come up to me and say, like, I don't want to donate. Like, I'm older, I don't really want to do the donate thing on the internet, but here's $40. This is all I have in my wallet. Here's $40. It's like, that's a lot of responsibility, right? When someone is willing to just open their wallet and give you whatever cash they have. So always be thinking about what are you going to do for them? How are you bringing them along and making them part of the team and not just someone who's a donor? You might notice that as we go through, I don't really use the word donor, and I prefer contributor because they're giving you something. It's a reciprocal relationship that you have with your audience. And again, this is thinking long term. I know some of you want to get a job, full-time job, work in Hollywood, and that's awesome. But also thinking long term, you may want to continue doing your own projects on the side. So how are you going to fund them? Some of these people may work for places or film festivals, or they may work for somewhere that does grants that you can pull for your film, maybe not this one, but a film you do in the future. So this is all really, really important stuff. And like I said, it starts long before you launch your crowdfunding campaign. Oh yeah, thinking about what you're going to do for your audience can also help you figure out what incentives you're going to give people for their contribution later on in the crowdfunding process. The fun stuff, that's like unique to your film, because anybody can give like backstage access, like behind the scenes photos. Anyone can give, access to see a film. That's not special. That's not something that's going to make someone go, oh, yeah, I actually do want to contribute to that. The name in your credits. I know we like to think it's cool, but for regular people, it's just not that cool. Like, it's cool to a point, It's got a limited dollar value, let's put it that way. Some thoughts on, you've picked your budget, you've picked your crowdfunding platform, and now you're going to launch your campaign in like a month or 2 months or whatever. So some stuff that you can do, as much planning and making of stuff that you can do before the campaign starts, that's where you want to be, as much as you can in advance. So I kind of referenced this earlier. Social media posts for crowdfunding campaigns have a 1% to 2% return. So you'll make 1% to 2% back from all the effort you put into your social media posts. That's nothing. Especially when you consider the volume of posts that you're going to be making, right? That's nothing. Direct email outreach makes you 20% to 30%. So as much as you may not want to do direct personalized emails, and let me tell you, they take a lot of time, this is worth it, and this is where the money's at. I did this, even though I very much did not want to ask people that I knew for money. I did it, and I think I cleared more than 30%, actually, in terms of how many emails I sent. Seed and Spark is the platform that I used to host the crowdfunding campaign. I picked Seed and Spark because they have a lot of great educational material about how to do this direct email outreach. They have a lot of good thoughts on how to make funding, not just funding, but how to make filmmaking a successful long-term career. especially if you want to do your own projects and not kind of like have to go through the Hollywood pipeline. And I chose that based on what I knew about audience building and marketing. I could see from what they had that they knew what they were talking about. This is where I got the numbers from. They know this stuff inside and out. And they have a lot of great resources that will, like templates that you can do to set up that will make this direct email outreach so much faster. But it does need to be personalized. So do it. It sucks, but do it. So you're going to make a bunch of lists when you're getting into pre-production, direct outreach. So everyone that you're going to contact by email. And then actually, I would also add social media by now. But like, you're going to direct message someone on social media, not like you're going to tag them in the public feed or whatever. Yeah?
Is it any different from like Instagram? Can you like boost a post or something like that? Is there any like?
So that costs money. And I know you're all on a budget, and I was on a budget too, and I could not afford, because anything that wasn't getting paid for from the crowdfunding campaign was coming directly out of my pocket. So I couldn't afford it, or I chose not to afford it. And they also have a very low return rate. You kind of need to have an account that has a lot of followers and a lot of good engagement for boosted posts like that to be worthwhile. But if you wanted to try it, like you could throw 10 or 15 bucks at it, like on Facebook. Facebook runs ads for that amount of money, and then just see how much reach you get, see how much engagement you get, and then make a decision from there if you think it's going to be worthwhile for you going forward. That's a good question, though. You can absolutely boost posts on Instagram or Facebook. I don't have it in here, but if you have a friend or someone that you talk to who's like an influencer, that can also be a helpful thing to do. So it doesn't have to be just email. I would say email is for everyone that you know really well personally. And that's where you're going to get your 20 to 30%. A social media direct message would be for people that you do know, but maybe you're not going to ask them directly for money. Maybe you'll ask them just, hey, can you share my campaign? I'm going to tag you in this, or I'm going to send you this graphic. Can you share it? And let people know what we're talking about. You could ask for money, but that's probably, you're going to be getting less. So those would be contributions that are more likely to be like under a couple $100, like probably under $100. So people you like kind of know, maybe you never met them in person, but you like messaged a bit on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. That would be a better way than like directly emailing them probably. You're going to personalize every outreach email. I have the template that I used. I'm giving it to you. You can use it however you like, tweak it. That makes things a lot easier, but just a line at the top, just one line at the top. To make it easier, like don't bury the personalization deep into the email. Leave it one line at the top so that it's easy for you to erase, and then you're going to do your individual emails. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. You know, it could just be like, I think one of them, I was looking at the emails I sent last night, one of them was like to my aunt or someone that I was related to. I was like, hey, I know you had a shoulder thing, or like, how's that doing? Like, it seemed like you were doing better. You know, I saw this post on Facebook. So it doesn't have to be a big thing, just something so that they know that you didn't just mass email them, because everyone can smell a mass email. Even if they don't think it directly, they just know that you didn't care. Media outlets. So getting coverage for your crowdfunding campaign, and this would apply to getting coverage for your film period, when you get into distribution, stuff like that, you are going to have to pitch them. Sometimes there's this perception that if you just like put your stuff out into the world, a blog or a newspaper or whatever, they're going to see your stuff, they're going to be like, oh, I want to cover that. And sometimes that does happen. I did have it happen on my crowdfunding campaign. But most of the time it's going to happen because you do direct outreach to someone who writes the vertical for the particular topic that's part of your film. And you're going to pitch them. You're going to say, hey, my film is about this. Just a couple sentences. This is what my film is about. We're doing this crowdfunding campaign. We're trying to raise, X amount of dollars in 30 days. And here's like a couple of angles that I thought you would be interested in. Would you be interested in writing about it? And maybe you'll get someone to cover you. So make a list. But these should not be just like the Orange County Register, the LA Times. These should be specific to your film. So it doesn't even have to be like they cover news that's exactly about the topic of your film. It could just be like they cover stuff, or they cover films by women, or they cover surf in Orange County, and my documentary has a lot about surfing in it. So I'm going to contact them and see if they'll be interested in it. Stuff like that. The more targeted you can be with this media outlet list, the more likely it is that you're going to be successful. So really take the time to think about it. And again, this is where having a team can be helpful, because you're only going to have so many ideas. When you can bounce ideas off of other people, they're going to know other outlets to talk to that you don't know about because you've never visited that website before. That's why having a team is so important. Another reason why. Potential partners. So this could be a matching contribution campaign. You've seen those maybe. This is where you're like, hey, for the next 24 hours, we have a generous contributor who's going to donate, who's going to match every donation up to $500. This is a great thing for parents, by the way, especially if it's your first crowdfunding campaign, because if you have parents that want to contribute to your success, mine did. So I said, hey, can you not, like, how much do you want to donate first, contribute? And they gave me a number. We'll say it was $500. I don't actually remember at this point. And I said, great. So on like day 15 of my campaign, I want to do a matching campaign. So can you hold your contribution until day 15? And they said, sure, no problem. So on day 14, I was like, listen, we've got someone who was going to match every donation up to $500. So like if you haven't donated yet, your $25 now becomes $50. That's motivating to people. So this is why thinking ahead of time, like making a whole list of everyone you're going to contact and thinking like, oh yeah, these are people that I can contact for matching contributions. And then they get the perk of like, yeah, I was going to help you anyway, but I like really helped you because more people were motivated to contribute in this time period. This can also look like partnering with people to do incentives. So maybe you've got a friend that runs like a t-shirt company, and they also do logo design, and so maybe you can, partner with them in some way, and they'll make a cool t-shirt that you can give to your crew and like 10 people who contribute at a certain level on your campaign. That's cool. And especially if you have a fiscal sponsor, those are a thing called gifts in kind. So they can get a tax write-off for donating, say like printing t-shirts. And then you get stuff that you can give to people that you don't have to pay for, because that's the thing you're going to have to budget for. And so it creates this nice circle. So there's lots of creative ways that you can not work the system, but increase your likelihood of funding. And then also, by the way, when you're doing all this outreach to partners, you're building your relationship, your web of relationships that's going to be part of your successful campaign and going forward. Thinking about the media outlet thing, you want to make a press kit ahead of time. Now, sometimes, especially if you're funding for production, you may not have a lot of stuff available, but you want to think about how can you make it easy for people to help you. So don't make people ask you for stuff. When you pitch someone to write about you in their blog or whatever, hey, these are some angles I thought about. Here's a link to our press kit. Because maybe they don't actually want to do an interview with you. Maybe they just kind of want to write something that's like a press release almost, and then throw that up there so that they have content. You've just made it easy for them. So your press kit should have high-res photos, crew and cast bios, talking points, meaning what's particularly interesting about your film. Why would someone be interested in talking about it? If they want to do an interview with the director or with your featured cast member, what could they talk to them about in relation to this movie that would be interesting to them? So you're kind of like, you're not doing their job, but you're like kickstarting their job to get the ideas flowing for them. Because they might go, oh, I don't want to talk about that, but that's a good idea. That makes me think of this, and that's what I want to cover. So be thinking about that. Stuff to make before you launch as much as you can. Social media posts, including like writing the text, making the graphics. If you can, make templates. I did a thing on the recommendation of the crowdfunding professionals at Seed and Spark where every time someone made a donation, I made like because I was traveling to make this film, I took some of my personal photos and I made like a digital postcard. And then I wrote like, greetings from Rarotonga, thanks to Cynthia for contributing. And then I would make a social media post. So that's content for you and your campaign. That's not you going, hey, look at me, give me some money. It's you going, hey, this person gave me some money, which is kind of like social proof. People are like, oh, look at all these people that are contributing to this campaign. That's cool. Maybe I'll contribute too. It seems like a safe thing to do because other people are trusting this person. So if you can do stuff like that, I made a template. I had 3 different backgrounds, and then I changed it each time someone made a contribution. Pre-writing your copy, which would include things like, you know, when you do a crowdfunding campaign, you can send updates periodically. You want to do that because you're engaging with people. You want to get them excited about it because if they've already made a contribution, they might make a second one. That does happen. And they also will tell their friends because they're excited about the momentum that you're gaining. You can pre-write a lot of this stuff. You don't have to put in specific numbers. But you can say like, hey, we're at day 30, and this is what's going on. Here's my fun bonus piece of content for today. Would you share it for today? And then you can like edit as you go along. But at least you don't have to sit down and know like, okay, I have a blank page and I have to write this update and it has to be today. So as much as you can, write stuff ahead. Milestone content is great to think about. So if when you hit 50% of your goal, or when you hit 100% of your goal, or you make your first $3,000, like whatever milestones you decide you want to celebrate. So I can't remember, for Seed and Spark, their whole thing was if you can raise 80% of a film budget, then you can make the film. But anything less than 80% and it starts to get really risky and difficult. So they would green light your film when you hit 80% of what you were hoping to make. So I planned a special video for when we hit 80%, the green light. I'm not gonna tell you what it is because I kind of don't want you to see it. It's fine. I danced for a while, and solo freestyle dancing is a big deal in Tahitian dance. And I didn't join dancing to freestyle, so I've never done solos except in a class. I soloed by myself. I got some friends to drum for me, and that was like my fun surprise. Like, yeah, we made it to 80%, and we got a green light. And it was, you can see, I'm still like, I kind of wish I hadn't told you that. It's on the internet, you can find it. Stuff like that, okay? That's the kind of stuff that really resonates with people and makes them want to contribute to your campaign and your success. So planning that stuff out in advance. I planned that in advance. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. If you have a fiscal sponsor, having your tax deduction letter, like a template for your receipt, ready to go, so that either as soon as someone donates to you, contributes, or right at the end of your campaign. I sent all of my tax deductible receipt letters right at the end of my campaign. That's great because then you don't have to think about it because there's a deadline that you have to meet for people to be able to put it on their taxes. So just send it right away. And you can write all that up at the beginning, and then all you have to do at the end is put in their name and how much they contributed, and then you email it to everyone and you're done. And then it's up to them whether or not they actually write it off. So that's a good thing to do ahead. You can probably think of other things that you could do ahead as well. But off the top of my head, that's all the stuff that I did. These are some of the things that I made ahead, some social media posts. Shout out to my 2015 self and terrible haircut. I did get this coverage in the newspaper where I was going to shoot in the June 7th, so like right at the end of the campaign. No, that was like midway through the campaign. And that I did not send them a press kit with good high-res photos. So they just pulled one from my campaign video, and now it lives forever on the internet. Sometimes that's what happens. A few more ideas. We already talked about doing a matching donor day. An in-person kickoff party could be a really fun thing, especially if it's at like a food that maybe makes sense for your film or like part of your storyline. Can you start prepping your incentives now? Is there anything you can do? Can you like, if you're going to do t-shirts, can you find the t-shirt vendor? As much as you can do ahead of time, because let me tell you, these incentives, they're also a lot of work. They're like a whole separate thing of work that you have to do. So I actually recommend as much as you can to try and stay away from physical product type of stuff, t-shirts, bags, stickers, whatever. As much as you can, especially if it means that you have to ask someone else to make the thing for you. Like if it's something you're going to print, you're going to send a postcard. That was one of my incentives. Everyone I sent a postcard from location. That's a pretty easy thing to do. It's pretty low cost. That's a great one. But there's going to be things that you can do ahead of time. So do those things ahead of time so that you're going to be more likely to make good on what you told people you would give. I made the mistake of telling people that I was going to hand make some stuff. And I was like, this is what you're going to get. And they still haven't gotten it, okay? 6 years later. And I feel a kind of way about that. A few parting thoughts. Don't forget your taxes, okay? Anything that you make from crowdfunding, you're going to have to pay taxes on. Generally speaking, and I'm not an accountant, you should ask an accountant about this. I'm very serious, because this can get you actually in a lot of trouble. But generally speaking, the advice is 30% of what you make is what you're going to have to pay in taxes. So if you have a $5,000 budget, you're going to pay $1,500 in taxes, about. That should be included in your $5,000 budget. So really, you actually need to raise $6,500 so that you can still have that $5,000 to spend. Okay, this is a mistake that I made. Literally, and I had been freelancing at this point for several years, long enough to know better. But we got to the end of the crowdfunding campaign, and I went, oh, I think I'm going to have to pay taxes on all of this.
Yeah,
And I did.
I had trouble because you have to pay the taxes, but you cannot write off your movie because you don't have a limited to the school. My accounting couldn't write off because I finished putting most of the money on my own. I'm like, okay, that's going to be a write-off for me, but it's not true. You know, you got to pay the tax, however you cannot write off anything.
Do not assume, never assume that you're going to get to skip the taxes. You will always have to pay the taxes. Number one lesson of freelancing, period, and taxes suck. So budget for them. I did not do this, so yes.
So from 650, 6,500, you also, so it's another amount of taxes, right?
It's true, it's going to change the percentages, but the point is like you're factoring it into your budget, and because like this is how much money you need to make the film, but then you haven't factored in that like when people get money, give you money, you're going to have to pay taxes on that money, right? That's all coming out of this. So instead of having $5,000, you had $4,500. Or no, that's wrong, $3,500. Sorry, I don't math anymore. This is Kickstarter, so this is another thing you're going to have to budget for, okay? Kickstarter takes a 5% fee off of every contribution that's given to you. And because it's all being given by credit cards, there's a credit card processing fee as well, which is going to run you between 3 and 5%. You need to factor for that. Because again, that's coming out of your pocket, your contributions. So 5% in fees for your Kickstarter platform. We'll assume 5% in processing fees. That's going to be 10%, $500 in fees. So now, you really need to raise $7,000 in order to have $5,000 for your movie and enough money to pay for taxes and enough money to pay for all of those fees. This is like the really practical stuff that people are probably not going to tell you, but it really bites you in the butt if you don't do it. Oh, by the way, those incentives that you're going to give people, t-shirts, stickers, whatever, you're also going to have to pay for that. So that should also be in your budget. That should be part of what you're fundraising for. And that can cost however much. So just know that and factor that into your budget. It's not something, I don't know, do you guys learn that when you're budgeting a film? Probably not. Yes? Fantastic. Not everyone tells filmmakers that this is stuff that you have to include in your filmmaking budget, but it is. And that would go under marketing or fundraising, however you want to do that. Crowdfunding in stages can be a good thing to do. It prevents you from having to raise like the whole $10,000 you need for the whole film. So it's like much smaller goals. Your audience is likely to be engaged in the process. It's going to hold you accountable to actually making the film, right? Because now you've got other people invested in you. And somebody might not have $100 to give you all in one chunk, but they might be able to give you $25 now and $25 in like 6 months when you want to raise for post-production. And maybe they can kick you another $25 6 months from then when you want to get into distribution and film festivals and stuff like that. You can do that. That's a doable thing. And you know, to be honest, it's probably wise, especially when you're earlier in your career, because budgets can change quite a bit, as I'm sure you're probably finding out. Sometimes, you know, you budget for a film and then you realize, oh, we didn't account for taxes, and now our budget's different, and so it's going to change, you know, how much money you have available for post and for distribution and stuff like that. So you can do specific parts, pre-production, post-distribution. You could even, if you have to travel, say, hey, we're going to just fundraise for the part to travel, this one part of production, and then we've got grants to cover the rest of it, however you want to work it. Even if you don't crowdfund through Seed and Spark, they have a really good crowdfunding handbook. I've actually linked it for you on this. I made you a page. I'll pull it up here in a second. But I've given you my email template for direct outreach. I give you an incentive list because sometimes, you know, the blank page, you get like, I don't even know what to do. So I gave you my incentive list. I didn't use all of those things. I think I put on there like, don't judge me. And then what else? Oh, the flyer that I used for in-person events. Just to kind of, and there are things that I would change about all of these things. And I have a link for this as well. So that looks like, so this is the email template. It's pretty long, but you want all this stuff in there. Here you go. See, there's a personalized. You got somebody, a friend of mine, got a new job. Wish them well on it before we get into, hey, I'm going to ask you for something for me. This is the page on the website. This is like, if you go here, this is the handbook here. It's from 2015, so some of the language is dated, but the information is really good. In fact, it's probably likely that there's some overlap in here between what I said, what I learned, and what they recommend. Yeah, questions about anything? Overwhelming?
Thank you.
Did I say at the beginning, I hope I never have to do it again? Because I hope I never have to do it again.
Just a thing about the taxes. I think because you guys are a student, has a way, I don't know how, but it has a way around that they can pay less taxes.
Yeah, because the taxes are dependent on your income. So if you're not working a lot or you only work part-time, then you'll have to pay less. But even then, because you'll be considered, even if you work for a company and you're an employee, this will be considered you working for yourself. So you'll have to pay self-employment tax in addition to state tax, in addition to federal tax, which is why they recommend 30% for someone who is self-employed.
Okay, that's what I didn't know.
Yeah, and like I said, ask an accountant. Even if the accountant is not familiar with funding and stuff related to finances for a film, they're still going to know stuff about finances and taxes related to being self-employed, which is what you will be considered in this instance, at least in the state of California. So that's all good stuff for you to know. I didn't put it in the slides, I don't think. I would have to look back at it now. But I wish, it was actually, maybe this is because of the topic of my film, and maybe it is partly because I did it by myself, but I actually found it to be quite emotionally taxing. And also because I just don't like asking people for money. I found that difficult as well. So like I said, when I got to the end of my campaign, I felt really drained. So if you can account for that, do it in terms of time and what you're going to be doing right after you do this campaign. Any other questions? Yeah.
You went over it, but what are some other examples of incentives we can give to the donors?
Yeah, good question. Where did I put it? Let's look at my list. I was trying to, so like stuff, there's always stuff that you can buy. I thought about doing a photo book from set because I was going somewhere that was quite beautiful and lent itself to photography. Posters, I think that's a pretty standard one. I had a campaign that I supported and they sent me, like they got physical printouts of a BTS photo, which was like, felt like a step above someone just emailing you a photo, you know? So they printed it out and they just had like multiple people say like, thank you, and wrote it on there. And I think there was like a cute little sticker or something. And it was in, the envelope was kind of, the movie was about camping. And so the envelope was like brown paper packaging. Like the more you can do to kind of like bring it into the world of your film, the more fun it's gonna be. And especially if you can do that in inexpensive ways, like packaging it in an envelope that's like brown paper and kind of evokes that camping style. It'll make people feel part of the film in a way that's very inexpensive, if that makes sense. I know people have done like visit the set stuff, maybe not super great for you as student filmmakers. Video calls, if you have someone from the cast who's maybe well known, or maybe they can do voices, maybe you can offer them to record like 10 voicemails for someone, like custom voices in a character voice or something. Find out what your team, what talents they have beyond filmmaking that could potentially contribute to something like this. And then just see. I said like instead of doing a premiere, maybe I'll do a private screening for someone if they, do a certain number, and I'll like have them, can invite 10 of their friends or whatever. If they give you a bunch of money, if they give you $1,000 or more, like that might be worth it for you. So some of the stuff I would say cost it out and just see if that's would work for you. And if you're like willing to put in the time for it. Yeah.
What are any concerns against using other platforms like GoFundMe? That's one question.
I wouldn't use GoFundMe for crowdfunding a film because of perception. So I think that because GoFundMes are usually used for personal, especially like personal tragedy, or like I have this really big need in my life. So it's such a subtle thing, perception, but it could hurt you in how people are willing to contribute. So platforms like a Kickstarter, like an Indiegogo, because those are already associated with raising money to do certain things like films or build products or stuff like that. It's less that you have to communicate to people. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's
Because some of this is education, right?
Yeah.
Because part of your relationship web is going to be people over a certain age who have not heard of Kickstarter and that's why people handed me cash out of their wallet, because they were like, I don't want to figure this out, so let me just give you what I have. Because there's that certain level of education, you also want to think about that when you're writing your copy, when you're doing your direct outreach. How much explaining do you need to do in this email? How much explaining did I do? I did a whole paragraph right here. Crowdfunding is a way for an independent film to build an audience and raise funds through smaller contributions from lots of people. We're offering fun rewards in exchange for pledges, including postcards, bonus content, downloadable travel journal, etc. So I actually did a little bit of education in all my direct outreach because I knew that some people I was going to be emailing don't know what crowdfunding is. And so you have to explain it to them. So it would be the same. In this case, because I wasn't using a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo, I opted not to say like I'm, crowdfunding through Kickstarter. If I had, I may have used that as well, because that would have been another simple word that you can insert in there that gets people's brain to go, oh, okay, I know what that is.
And then do you know anyone who's ever used multiple platforms? That's one question. And another question, have you ever heard of anyone, if the topic of the film is something that serves a certain community or a purpose, is it unethical, or so to speak, or has anyone tried raising funds for film through a nonprofit organization to avoid those taxes?
You still have to pay the taxes.
If it's
Even if you fiscally sponsored your film, you have to pay the taxes. The fiscal sponsorship is a bonus for the person who's contributing, because they can write it off their taxes. You don't really get a bonus from having a fiscal sponsor unless, like I talked about earlier, they're offering some kind of mentorship or other resources, access to their email list. Like if they're willing to put out a blast to their email list to say, hey, we're fiscally sponsoring this film and they're running this contribution campaign right now and we're partnering with them, that's valuable. And that's valuable to you, but it's not going to get you out of the taxes. So you can't get out of the taxes. And what was the first question?
multiple,
Oh, yeah. I don't know that it would be bad. It could be confusing. I don't know of anyone who has off the top of my head, partly for that reason. So all of these platforms, when you use them, you have basically a direct email list without having to run the direct email list yourself, right? Because you can post campaign updates and it's going to go directly to their email in addition to being part of the Kickstarter platform. So that is an advantage that you would lose if you switched platforms. If you were going to do, say, 2 crowdfunding campaigns for a film and you were going to switch platforms. It doesn't mean that it wouldn't work. I would say you would want to post to your Kickstarter people, hey, we're doing another one, but it's over here on Indiegogo, so here's the link. I mean, you could do that. It's probably not the best idea, though. Did I answer your question enough about incentives? Does anyone have cool incentive ideas?
a lot of times, like TikTok and kind of shouting out people live if it gets like that popular.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, I think some people might appreciate.
I think people love a personal shout out. And like I said earlier, it gives you a way to say, gives you the potential to write on there, hey, so-and-so made a contribution. You could, tell us how much. Thanks so much. If you're interested in also making a contribution, and then you can put the link in there, So it's a way to kind of like subtly say, hey, donate to my campaign, without having to say, hey, donate to my campaign.
Would you say that appreciation in the credits is like really not enough for a lot of people? Or
I mean, that's only enough for people that really love you. So your family will be stoked to be part of your film, right? Probably. But beyond that, especially now, right? 6 years ago, 10 years ago, when crowdfunding was still new, it was really cool to get your name in the credits of a film for $25. That was cool. I don't think it is as much anymore for the regular person.
I think just for the regular person, this is the time when they staying and leaving the the room when the credits appears. So
Yeah, a lot of people don't watch credits.
for us, this is a big thing because we know what to watch. For them, it's like nobody will see it. Kind of.
Yeah, actually, there's a film that came out that I helped to fund I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago maybe. And it came out, I watched it over the weekend, and I know the contributor section was in there, but because it was a streamer, you actually couldn't even see the names. Because it was so small, and just in how the formatting had worked, because it was meant to be seen in a theater, and here it was being streamed as part of a festival because of COVID. and you couldn't even see the names. And I was like, oh, that's a bummer for people who care, you know? I didn't care. My name's in there somewhere. It's not the first time my name had been in a credits roll. It's fine. But for someone for whom that was a big deal, that's a bummer. If that's the first time they're getting to see it, like it was the first time for me getting to see that film. Good questions. Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about one part explaining crowdfunding to a lot of people who are unfamiliar, but if you're talking about a film that's about a niche subject, like if you're talking about a different culture, how would you necessarily, let's say, promote this to other people who are unfamiliar with that sort of subject?
Oh, that's a really good question. I did not do a lot of this in my campaign, although it certainly could have. Like if I were to do a campaign now, I would do it a lot differently. And I think that I would actually make, for me, that education part of my content. So I'd figure out little ways I could say like, hey, Pacific Islander culture, or like in the Cook Islands, you know, they do this with the Tivai. Actually, we just talked about it earlier today in the preview, in the warm-up for your interview. One of the ways that quilts are used is women who have made them will wrap their husbands in it when they die, and they'll be buried in their quilt that the wife made. And when I first heard that, I was like, wow, that's really weird, because in the States, that's not how we treat those kinds of heirlooms. They're treated as heirlooms to be passed down through generations. Like you want to preserve the thing that someone made. And Pacific cultures are really not like that. They're very indigenous cultures. They understand that things have a life and that sometimes things have an end of life. And for them, you know, I don't know that anyone would even put it in these words, but I think there's a very spiritual sense of like putting part of yourself into the grave with your husband and like recognizing that part of you is gone now because of how close you were to that person. And I would probably make a short video just like this, me explaining it like that, my learning, the thing that I learned. And these are the kinds of things that, you know, we're going to explore in this film. That's part of it. So if you wanted to, you could even tie it into world building. You know, this is, if you're not familiar with this culture, this is a thing that happens in our culture, and this is going to be as significant as part of the film. And you don't have to go into like giving away the details. But, you know, if this is something that happens in your culture, or maybe if you can synthesize down to make it relatable a little bit more broadly, that can be helpful as well. So I think that's probably a really good way of handling that. That would be my recommendation. That's a great question, though. Especially because niche films are, I know it can seem really difficult to find an audience, but once you've found them for niche topics, they will follow you and they will go with you on the journey of your career. Yes.
Sorry, my question's a little bit more money related.
It's okay. It's important.
No, that was such a good question. Like I teared up with the quilt. Yeah. Okay. So with taxes, the taxes that, so you have to pay taxes based on the budget that you earned, and then also taxes based on what you make as well, right? I'm just assuming. I don't know. Like if you make money from the film, and then.
Oh, you're talking about in distribution?
Yeah. So like budget taxes and then distribution taxes.
Correct. If you were to make money off the sale of the finished film, then you would have to pay taxes on that as well. But think about it, if this helps you, when someone, let's say you make $5,000 from your crowdfunding campaign, that's going to you, that's counted as income.
Okay.
So that's why you have to pay taxes on it. So if you sell the film later, and maybe you sell it to a distributor like a streamer, and they give you, you know, $20,000 for it, and the $20,000 comes to you or your company, that's income. So you have to pay taxes on that. Anytime something is coming to you as income, you're going to have to pay taxes on that.
But if you have a production company and it's a company, you can write off what you expend against what you make it.
That's true.
So balance. But you have to have
That's true. So when you get $5,000 for your film, you're going to have to pay taxes on the $5,000. But you spend $3,000 on crew and equipment and traveling or whatever. So then when you go to sell your film, you can write off the $3,000 that you spent, because that's money that you spent to make something.
So if you have a production company and the certain amount of money they use for crew and everything, you can write off that money because you spent it to make it.
Yes.
Sorry.
Say it again for me one more time.
If you happen to have a production company, I'm taking the production.
Yep.
So you're given $5,000. It's taken in as income, right?
Yep.
And then $3,000 is used to pay for crew, equipment, all the stuff needed to make the film. You can write it off because it was used
Yes.
to make the film.
Yes. So basically how write-offs work is that when you go to pay taxes and you tell the government, hey, I made $5,000, but I spent $3,000 to do my job, they're going to go, okay, so you made $2,000, so we're going to tax you on $2,000. That's how it works. Yes. Yes, ish. This is why you should talk to an accountant, but basically, yes.
And you have to have production company, you have to pay for that, you have, so as a student, you're better off just pay the taxes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, well, some of it gets into timelines because, I earned that money in 2015, so I had to pay taxes on it for the tax year of 2015, and today if I finish a film and I sell it in some way, I'm going to be making money off of it in 2021, so I'm going to have to pay taxes on it in 2021. So I'm only going to be able to write off what I spent to make the film in 2021, because it has to be in the same tax year.
You can come back 3 years. You can come back 3 years.
If you're working on it.
I don't know about that. That would be a question for an accountant. And it sucks to pay for accountants. I know nobody wants to pay $200 or $300, but you should do it.
I think there was a member that joined that was an accountant.
That's a great relationship to have. Hello, what do you need? Do you like donuts? I love to buy donuts for accountants.
Right? That was very touchy about the quilt. I didn't know that about. That's a sales pitch too, because you touch everybody's heart. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
That was neat.
Well, I failed at making the doc, but it was a good thing that I did, because I had a lot of learning to do out of that failure, not just in the failure itself, but culturally how I should have approached it better. Because the short reason of why I failed at it is I broke some key cultural rules and how I went about it, because I didn't know. And I figured it out right away. Rule number one, how I said don't ask people for money. Don't roll up to people from a culture that's technically yours, but that you didn't grow up in, so you don't quite always know the social rules. You don't roll up with a camera on your back and say, hey, can I interview you for my movie? No. But I didn't know that, right? Because the stuff that I learned in film school kind of made it sound like you could just walk into a community and be like, hey, and start asking people, hey, can I interview you for my movie? Can I interview you for my movie? And someone's going to say yes. I did have someone say yes, but not because she wanted to be in my movie, because I think she knew what I was actually really after, which was not the movie, it turned out, which I know now, but I didn't know then. So that was rule number one. It's very much a culture of relationships where you go and you sit down, you don't even bring the camera, you don't even talk about it, and you just get to know the person. And then you can go back and say hey, I'm making this thing. Is that even something that you would be interested in hearing more about? And then if they say yes and give you permission, then you can go in and get a little bit deeper. Yeah. I figured that out pretty quick, because they looked at me and they were like, oh, you look Cook Islands. And then I opened my mouth and they're like, oh, she's American. And what do Americans do? They come here and they take our stuff and they take our designs. Literally 2 years after this trip, I saw designs in Target that they were totally ripped off. Like I was so shocked that I could even tell. But I was like, I took photos of it and I showed it to my sister. I was like, don't these look like T-Bye-Bye? And she goes, yeah, because they're pretty distinctive. And they had machine made it, and I was so mad. And I was like, no wonder no one would talk to me when I showed up with the camera. Of course they wouldn't talk to me, so I wasn't even mad. I was like, but I was panicking, right? Because I had raised this money, and now people were like, she's gonna make a film. And then I didn't have enough footage to make a film. This is a whole thing. Good things.
Not a failure, you just learned.
Yeah. I gave an artist talk a couple of weeks ago, and I said, thank God I actually failed at making that movie, because what I got from it was so much better than a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to finish it someday.
Yeah,
I swear I am.
Exactly.
I really will, but it's going to be a much different film than I thought I was going to make, because I was making it the way that I had been taught in classes, and I was making it from a very Western perspective, and that was not, it wasn't the right approach. But I was never going to know that.
That's why they didn't
Yeah,
give you
they were like,
They go,
no.
She's gonna twist.
I had someone say to me, your Nana should have taught you how to do this. Because I would tell people, like, I was trying to learn how to do this for myself, and I'm also making a movie about it at the same time. Right? 2 birds with 1 stone. And someone said, your Nana should have taught you. And I was like, oh, but my Nana lived on the other side of the ocean. That's not my fault. It gets complicated. But I don't fault anyone for not talking to me. They should not have. Because I had not proved myself to be worthy of, or like, I had not proved that I would take care of their stories in a way that is good.
Your intentions was there because you want to protect the culture and show the world, but
Yeah. So at the mama that gave me the interview, she said at one point, I can tell you really care and you really want this. And I was pretty desperate by that point, because I was like 2 weeks in and hadn't gotten any interviews, and I was on like my last 2 days. And she's like, I can just tell. I was like, she knew that I didn't actually want to make a movie, that I just wanted to like connect with my people. But she knew that's what I wanted. So she agreed. And it's not like a great interview, because at that point I was stressed. But it's usable to a degree. I'm going to finish that doc. I have other projects that I have been working on. Like I said, I don't really focus specifically on filmmaking anymore. It's definitely part of my practice as an artist. I made a short, like 2-minute piece. Actually, I don't even think it's quite 2 minutes. Earlier this year, as part of a project that I did with a museum in Long Beach. I'm working with them again. I'm working with a community organization. We're doing a project right now on grief and loss, because our community has lost a lot of people to COVID. The Pacific Island community has experienced the most deaths of any ethnic minority in California per capita. I have not personally lost anyone, but I don't know anyone else in the community who has not lost at least one person. So we're doing some community healing work in that, and I don't know, maybe there will end up being a video element to it. But that exhibition starts in March, so that's what I'm working on right now. Thanks for asking. Who knows? Who knows what the future will be? I've kind of released myself from the category of like filmmaker, and now I just make stuff in whatever medium I think suits it. There's something about it, You go to film school and it was like, oh, you're a filmmaker, so what films have you made? Like, none. None that, like the kind that you're thinking of. So, I hope that if you continue on in your career and you start to feel like that title of filmmaker or, sound engineer or whatever, part that you play on a crew, if that starts to not fit, I hope that you will pursue that and know that you don't necessarily have to fit the roles that you get taught here. Not that they're bad, but like sometimes you just outgrow them or you change and they're just not part of you anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. Filmmaking may become a chapter in your life, and that's cool. Or maybe it will just be your life. That's also cool. Well, thanks for coming out. I'm like so impressed with the attendance. I'm very flattered. And you asked wonderful questions.